There is an island in the Arabian Gulf that you can see from space, built entirely by human hands, shaped from tens of millions of cubic meters of sand pulled off the ocean floor. It was sold to the world as one of the greatest engineering achievements of the modern era. Billionaires flew in from London and Moscow to put their names on waiting lists. Celebrities bought properties before construction was finished. And then, when a global financial crisis arrived, the empire behind it nearly collapsed overnight. But here is what most videos about this story get wrong. The full picture is far more complicated, far more interesting, and ultimately more instructive than either the hype or the disaster narrative admits. Welcome to Strategic Dynamics Edge. I am going to walk you through exactly what happened, what the evidence actually shows, and what lessons this story holds that still apply today. If you are new here, hit subscribe right now. We cover the world's biggest economic and strategic stories with precision, not sensationalism. Now let's get into it. To understand what Dubai attempted, you first have to understand the moment the decision was made. It was the late 1990s. Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum had identified a specific and urgent problem. The Emirates' oil reserves were finite and modest compared to neighbors like Abu Dhabi and Saudi Arabia. Dubai needed a second economic engine, built not on what lay beneath the ground, but on what could be constructed above it. Tourism, real estate, financial services, aviation, and to make that vision credible globally, they needed something bold enough to put Dubai on the map permanently, so they decided to manufacture land itself. Nakheel Properties, a state-backed developer, was handed a mandate that would have seemed impossible anywhere else. Build new land in the sea, shape it like a palm tree, make it the most desirable address on the planet. According to Nakheel's own project documentation, construction involved dredging tens of millions of cubic meters of sand from the Gulf floor and placing millions of tons of rock to form an 11-kilometer breakwater protecting the island from wave erosion and shamal winds. Palm Jumeirah added significant new coastline to Dubai's waterfront, on land that had not existed a decade earlier. The Atlantis Resort, a multi-billion-dollar hotel, opened in 2008 and became the island's anchor, signaling to the world that this was not a concept drawing. This was a functioning destination. Dubai then announced two more projects, Palm Jebel Ali, designed to be significantly larger, and the World Islands, 300 individual sand islands shaped into the continents of the Earth, each to be sold privately to developers and buyers. The global marketing campaign that followed was unlike anything the real estate industry had previously attempted. Sales offices opened in London, New York, Moscow, and Hong Kong. Satellite photographs of the emerging islands circulated on every media platform. High-profile buyers acquired properties on Palm Jumeirah. The island was not just a real estate development. It was a signal of Dubai's arrival as a global economic force. And from the outside, it all looked completely unassailable. That is always the moment to start asking harder questions. What did the construction actually cost the marine environment? This is an area where real evidence exists, but where it is important to be precise rather than dramatic. The Arabian Gulf is a shallow, semi-enclosed body of water with a relatively fragile coastal ecosystem. Large-scale dredging on the order of what Palm Jumeirah required does cause documented disruption. Suspended sediment reduces light penetration, which affects coral and seagrass health, and physical displacement of the seafloor destroys habitat directly. These impacts were recorded by researchers in real time and are not seriously disputed. A peer-reviewed study published in the journal Water in 2022 documented measurable changes in water quality and surface temperature around the island between 2001 and 2020. A 2019 study in Marine Pollution Bulletin documented water stagnation and reduced tidal flushing around the world islands. These findings are consistent with what environmental scientists would predict from a project of this scale. What is more complicated is the long-term picture. Ecosystems are not static. Some areas near the Palm have shown signs of adaptation and partial recovery over time. Nakheel has pointed to artificial reef programs and environmental monitoring efforts undertaken during and after construction. The honest scientific position is that the dredging caused significant and lasting disruption to the coastal marine environment, that some of that disruption is likely permanent, and that the full ecological accounting over decades is still ongoing. Describing the damage in absolute terms as completely irreversible everywhere overstates what the current evidence conclusively proves. What it does prove is that projects of this scale carry environmental costs that should be understood and disclosed up front, and in Dubai's case, they largely were not. The breakwater design created an additional problem. By encircling the island as a solid barrier, it reduced the natural tidal circulation inside the palm, leading to lower oxygen levels in the enclosed water. This was subsequently addressed by cutting gaps in the breakwater to restore some tidal flow, an engineering modification that helped but did not fully resolve the reduced circulation. This is not a minor footnote. It represents a significant design consequence that required retrofitting after construction was complete. By 2008, Nakheel was one of the most recognized developers on the planet. The Atlantis Hotel opened with one of the most expensive launch events in hospitality history, and then in September of 2008, Lehman Brothers collapsed. The global financial crisis did not merely slow Dubai's island program, it exposed how deeply the entire model depended on perpetual confidence and perpetual credit. When credit markets froze, Nakheel's financial position deteriorated rapidly. The company reported very substantial losses in 2009. The parent entity Dubai World underwent what was at the time one of the largest corporate debt restructurings globally. Financial support from Abu Dhabi was required to stabilize the situation. For the island program, the consequences were concrete and immediate. Palm Jebel Ali stopped entirely. Construction equipment sat idle. Property prices fell sharply. Investors who had purchased off-plan properties could not take possession of what they had paid for. Workers lost employment in a city where residency was tied to employment contracts. Legal protections for off-plan buyers at the time were limited, and the human cost was significant and largely undercovered in the financial press. The world islands presented a different kind of problem, one that predates and outlasts the financial crisis. Connecting 300 individually owned islands to the mainland in a genuinely livable way requires coordinated investment in transport, water, power, and sanitation infrastructure that no single developer can finance alone, and that 300 separate owners with no shared timeline are structurally very difficult to coordinate. Some development has occurred. The Heart of Europe project has completed hotels and villas that are now operational, and a small number of other plots have seen construction. But the proportion of developed land against the total area remains strikingly small more than 20 years after the first sand was dredged. That is not simply a consequence of the 2008 crisis. It reflects a fundamental structural challenge in the original model that the marketing materials did not address. Palm Jumeirah itself is a different story entirely, and it is important to tell it accurately. The island did not just survive the 2008 crisis. It recovered fully and then exceeded its pre-crisis trajectory. By the mid-2020s, it had become one of the most expensive residential markets on Earth, with individual villa transactions setting records for the Emirates. What made Palm Jumeirah succeed where the others stalled? It was connected to Dubai's mainland by a road tunnel and monorail from the beginning. Its utilities were built into the foundation rather than being planned for later. It was close enough to the city to function as a neighborhood extension rather than a remote destination. And the Atlantis Hotel established an early hospitality anchor that drove both tourism and long-term residential demand. The livability that Palm Jumeirah delivered from day one is the single most important reason it worked. And the absence of that livability is the single most important reason the World Islands and Palm Jebel Ali did not. Palm Jebel Ali sat largely untouched for roughly 15 years after the 2008 crisis. In 2024, Nakheel announced a funded revival under Dubai's 2040 Urban Master Plan. Infrastructure contracts were awarded. In early 2026, a major villa development deal was signed with handovers projected for 2027. The revival appears genuine and backed by real capital. Property regulations in Dubai have also strengthened considerably since 2009. Offering better protections to off-plan buyers than existed during the first wave. That is a meaningful improvement. What it cannot change is the experience of the investors from 2007 and 2008 whose timelines were broken. The same promise, made again, to new buyers in a better regulatory environment, but structurally similar in its dependence on future delivery. Dubai is building again. The 2040 vision is ambitious. The Gulf is also measurably warmer than it was when Palm Jumeirah's first frond was shaped, and sea levels continue to rise. Climate adaptation is a real engineering challenge for any low-lying coastal infrastructure, and Dubai's planners are aware of it. Whether the engineering responses being built into the new projects are sufficient will only be answerable over decades, not years. The honest takeaway from the full arc of Dubai's island program is this: ambition executed with infrastructure and connectivity can deliver something extraordinary, as Palm Jumeirah demonstrates. Ambition without those foundations produces a different result, as the world islands and the original Palm Jebel Ali both show. The environmental costs of large-scale land reclamation are real, documented, and partially irreversible, and they deserve honest accounting alongside the commercial success stories. And the gap between a marketing promise and a delivered community is always larger than the brochure suggests. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Dubai's new wave of island development has genuinely learned from this, or is the pattern simply repeating with better PR? Share this with someone who follows global real estate. Subscribe to Strategic Dynamics Edge if you are not already here. We are going to keep following this story as it develops.